One thing about APIs is that you need to make sure that they're always super intuitive and super consistent and coherent in terms of how the different endpoints work, how the different flows work, how the terminology used in the API changes or doesn't, right? Because developers really like consistency, because otherwise they might build things a certain way, expecting the system to behave in a certain way, and if they suddenly find out that it isn't that way, it throws them off, right? It throws their kind of logic off as well. So we've, number one, made sure that we've sort of really thought about that. I mean, we go into long discussions just about the naming of a particular variable, right? Because that's how precise we want to be. That's how sort of that's how good we want to be with that, right? But then at the same time, when it comes to taking one step higher, how we help the crypto platforms, we've taken time to fully understand what the funds flows of crypto platforms look like, right? And therefore, we've designed our APIs to make sure that those type of flows can be easily achieved in a very few number of endpoints by our clients, right? So that's why overall then, when you combine all of these things, we can hopefully ensure that our clients take a very small amount of time to integrate with our API and go live, right? Ultimately then our APIs allow our clients to automate a whole bunch of their flows. The big point over here is automating deposits and payouts from end users of these clients, because that's a process that you don't want being manual. It's something. It's the kind of transactions that our clients will be processing in the thousands or hundreds of thousands, right? So you can't have people sitting and manually looking at deposits and allocating them to particular users. So our APIs allows for that, right? Our API allows our clients to generate virtual accounts for each of their end users. So it's a unique account number for each end user. So therefore, it also means that any reconciliation is automated, because one account number receives typically funds only from one particular user, and therefore the system can easily kind of match it up, right? So those are some of the things that we've thought about when building our API. When we speak with our clients, a theme that kept coming up is about how often their users were complaining about deposits being delayed, right? You and I might think that a couple of hours of delay is not such a big deal, but the way it impacts platforms is that users are impatient, and then they go and start complaining on social media, right? So they'll go on Reddit, they'll go on LinkedIn, they'll go all sorts of places on the internet and start complaining about how bad a particular platform is because they held up their money for 2 hours, right? And that's not a good thing. That's not what crypto platforms want. And the main reasons why transactions are typically held up is because of some potential manual compliance process that has been triggered, as part of the bank or as part of a payment provider that's being used by the crypto platform. So on our side, we've built these webhooks where we proactively notify our clients of any payment that might have triggered a manual compliance review, right? So the thinking over there is, even if the user doesn't have their money instantly, as long as the client can proactively manage the relationship with the end user by telling them that, hey, we've got your money, it's taking a bit of extra time for it to be processed, but we've got your money, right? That reassures the user, because now the platform has actually managed to contact the user preemptively, telling them that there might be a potential delay in their payment. So they don't have to now stay in the dark and keep wondering where that money was, right? Especially in the scenario of real-time payments, because as a user now, if you know that typically your deposits go through in real time, and this one time when you've sent money, it's taken 5 hours, you're going to be left wondering as to why that money hasn't arrived, right? And you're going to be on the phone to the platform, you're going to be on their customer support, and that's what platforms want to avoid, right? Bad publicity, but then also at the same time, additional support queries that this might generate, right? Because if you're proactively notifying somebody, that means one less support call, one less support email to take, and that all adds up to a lot of operational efficiency ultimately when you're talking about transactions and users in the hundreds of thousands or millions. We always try and stay as close as possible to our customers, because ultimately we want to make sure that we're building stuff that customers actually will use, and we're validating stuff that we're building with our customers. So some of the things that we've built is around improving operational efficiency around returning funds, right? So a big well, I wouldn't say a very big problem, but a recurring problem with crypto platforms is that they often need to send back money that they receive that they don't identify, or it's arrived from somebody who's not their user, or money that's arrived that doesn't pass their own compliance and risk checks, and therefore needs to be returned back to the sender. Now, it's interesting, but in the banking world and bank payments world, unlike the card world, there isn't a sort of by default refund method built in. So in the card industry, you can simply sort of initiate a refund, money just automatically goes back through the channels. In the banking world, that doesn't really exist, right? So what we've done is we've kind of encapsulated a lot of the complexity behind a return that somebody would manually do by doing multiple steps into a single step, where we just ask effectively our user or the crypto platform to tell us which payment they want to return, and then we obscure all of that complexity away and we take care of it, right? But then at the same time, we've our customers told us that often they don't want to return the full amount that's been received from the user, because perhaps they want to charge some fees, right? In which case we allow them to do that as well, right? So those are sort of the level of detail in which we think about when it comes to crypto platforms, because typical players who are not focused on a particular industry, they're not going to go this deep, right? They're just going to keep things at a surface level. As long as the happy parts are working, they're usually okay with that, right? They're not going to go into specific problems faced by specific industries. We've built our platform specifically for crypto platforms, right? As we mentioned, and one of the big things that crypto platforms always end up doing is stitching together a fiat solution by contracting with and by integrating with a lot of different banks or payment service providers, right? And that's a big problem, because that means when it comes to their fiat operations, there's no single process, right? So teams on their side have to manage multiple banking dashboards. They've got their liquidity spread out across multiple bank accounts, across multiple partners. Typically, for each currency or a couple of currencies, platforms end up having different partners. So that means that they're having to manage all of this scale through very, very, very manually, right? So by having a platform like us, where we can allow them to have a single API to actually access accounts and payments in multiple currencies, in local schemes of many countries, as well as foreign exchange, right? So FX services all via the same API means that the use case for platforms having to go to multiple providers starts becoming less and less, starts diminishing a lot more, right? And therefore now you've got a situation where all of the processes are uniform, because one of the biggest values that we add as Fiat Republic is actually create that uniformity through our API. So we in the background do all the complex plumbing work to integrate the different formats of the various banks and different file systems, different APIs, etc., and try and harmonize all of that into, let's say, a single language, if you will, right? So in our API, regardless of which bank somebody is using, which payment scheme somebody is using, it's as simple as telling us, I want an account in GBP, or I want to send a payment via faster payments, right? Everything else we take care of, right? Those are things that platforms don't have to think about. And that's how we really, really make it easy for crypto platforms, by offering a purpose-built Fiat as a Service API. The way I look at it is sort of two different angles. There's processes and there's systems, right? So from a process perspective, it's about making sure that we have the right kind of onboarding processes in place. We have a process which is not sort of necessarily acting as this big gatekeeper, right, ready to deny you. It's a more collaborative process to make sure that we work together with the platforms to actually onboard them, to help them remedy any compliance findings that we might have, because of which a provider would not integrate them, right? So we give them opportunities to actually fix any issues and then reassess them in order to ultimately be able to onboard them, right? So our default stance is not to deny, but our default stance is to actually accept, right? But we'll work with you to be able to do that, right? So within that way, we make sure that people within Fiat Republic understand that we are compliance first. They understand the importance of compliance, right? They understand that compliance at Fiat Republic is not a second-class citizen, as you might find in a lot of companies, right? It's not. We're not doing compliance because we need to do it, right? We're doing compliance because we know we kind of want to do it, because we can use that as a real competitive advantage when it comes to being in this industry, right? And ultimately, I think that's what's going to help us win. So that's a little bit on the process side. But then there's also the system side, right? Because you have to make sure that you have the right kind of systems to be able to manage that compliance-related risk on your platform. And based on my experience in the payments industry over the last 9-10 years, I have never really seen any platform that has got good compliance systems in place from day one, right? They always think that, let's just start operations and we'll figure it out as we go along, right? Or let's just do things manually or on spreadsheets, and as our volumes ramp up, we'll figure it out, right? And what happens, a couple of months down the line, they start getting transactions, and then all hell breaks loose because they're not able to manage their risk properly. So what we've done is made sure that from day one, we've got automated, screening and monitoring systems in place, right? Through good quality suppliers, sort of tier 1 suppliers that we know of, we've worked with before in the past, so that we don't fall in that trap, right? But then at the same time, the reason why we're kind of doing this is also because it's really important for us when it comes to securing banking partners, because where it really helps then is when we rock up to a bank and we ask them to give us accounts and form a relationship with Fiat Republic, we can tell them that, look, we've got our house in order when it comes to compliance from day one, right? So this is not a thing that we are telling you we're going to have in place a year down the line after the relationship starts. We have that today, right? In a lot of cases, probably up to the same standard that you yourself as the bank are doing things as well. Okay, so that's what we really mean when we say that we're doing compliance first. Effectively, it means that from the very beginning of our journey, let's say, we're taking compliance seriously, right? To the point that it's kind of a strategic pillar for us, right? Our big vision is to become the only Fiat API that a crypto platform needs, right? What does that mean? That kind of goes back to our previous points of how today platforms are stitching together solutions, having to go to multiple providers, multiple contractual relationships, technical integrations, multiple operational processes, etc., right? Which causes a lot of inefficiencies in the process, and ultimately somewhere along the line ends up affecting end users. So by being the only Fiat API, we want to be able to, provide access to currencies and payment schemes to crypto platforms based on where their users are, right? So we want to effectively, ideally make sure that we can offer all the currencies that our crypto platforms wants to operate in through a single platform. And that's not ultimately just limited to bank transfers. Bank transfers is how we've started, but we see us ultimately aggregating a lot of different payment methods as well. So that's cards, that's alternative payment methods. In Europe, for example, you've got SoFort and you've got Ideal, which are popular in certain countries, but with large populations and the primary payment method that's used. In Brazil, you've got Pix. Pix in the last couple of years has taken over like a storm. It's coming up in so many conversations that we have with our customers, right? So that's something that we're really starting to look at seriously as well. So yeah, overall, really about being that one API that that crypto platforms need in order to access all of their fiat-related needs.